Jake, it's great to see you today.
Thanks for having me back, Jason.
Jake, you're a U.S. Air Force veteran, and today you're a very popular YouTuber who puts out updates as to what is going on within the war in Ukraine. And there's been something really exciting over the past couple of weeks, which is Ukraine's invasion of Kursk and Belgorod regions of Russia. What do you make of that? How big of a deal is this?
Well, first of all, let's just say there's been a huge spike in views and engagements. There hasn't been a lot of significant changes on the map the last 9 months or so. So this was a brilliant move by the Ukrainians to strike the Russians basically where they least expected. We all were thinking that Ukraine was planning something. Zelensky, the last couple of months, kept hinting that a major operation was being planned. And I watched this war daily and I didn't see it coming. The fact that they crossed the border into Russia, maneuver warfare, armored columns going across these two defense lines staffed by conscripts, they've completely humiliated the Kremlin. I believe probably Russia did have the intelligence, but not even they believed it. Ukraine was being pretty tricky. With Russia's reinvasion of the Kharkiv Oblast, they began moving troops to the border region. Ukraine was talking about we need to protect ourselves from maybe Russia invading Sumy. Russia didn't see it coming. I didn't see it coming. And it's been a spectacle to watch the last 9 days.
So, overall, though, when you look at this, weren't you expecting nuclear warfare to break out? We've heard for months and months that once there was escalation and once Ukraine crossed the red line and entered into Russia, there would undoubtedly be nuclear warfare. Why didn't that happen?
It is fascinating because I'm checking these clips on Russian Media Monitor. I want to see what the Kremlin is saying about this invasion of their country. Their sovereign territory, their territorial integrity is being challenged. And nobody right now is talking about nuclear weapons. Not Putin, not Medvedev, not Solyov. Nobody wants to talk about nuclear weapons because they know they were never going to use them. They were never going to nuke Berlin or nuke Washington, D.C. in response to the delivery of Patriot systems or F-16s. It was all scare tactics. And I used to be a nuclear missile operations officer. I've thought a lot about nuclear doctrine. And I made a video on my channel almost 2 years ago giving 10 or 12 really good reasons why it never makes sense for Russia to use a nuclear weapon. But I'll give you my top two why even today, when Kursk has been invaded, when the armed forces of Ukraine is occupying Russian territory. The first reason, the Chinese specifically told Putin, you can't use nuclear weapons in your special military operation. The other two major nuclear powers being India and China, they've communicated this to Moscow. You can't use nuclear weapons. That's not good for us. So if India and China were to participate in economic sanctions, that would be lights out for Russia overnight, basically. So Putin has to be considerate of India and China, and he doesn't want to get on their bad side. The other top reason, I believe the only reason why Putin is still alive, why nobody in Western intelligence is trying to assassinate him, maybe Ukraine is trying to assassinate him, but nobody in the CIA or MI6 is trying to take Putin out, because the West still believes Putin is a rational actor who will not use nuclear weapons. We couldn't say that about Prigozhin or Dmitry Yukin or some other crazy people in Russia's government. So if Putin uses a nuclear weapon, that's the end of Putin. He'll have to pick his favorite command bunker, go underground, and he'll never be able to return to the surface again. That is what Putin would lose if he chooses to use a nuclear weapon, even on his own soil. Even if he starts nuking his own territory, the West, the global South would have to respond, and there'd be no benefit to the Russians if they used a nuclear weapon. Putin knows this, Dmitry Medvedev knows this, Solyov knows this, which is why they've gone so silent on all of their nuclear scare tactics.
So, aside from that, we've seen something really strange happening within Russia. The Russian troops just seem to be surrendering in very large numbers. And it's not just some of them, it includes the Chechens, those who are mobilized soldiers, conscripts, that is. Overall, when you look at this, what does it say about the current state of the Russian military? And what does it say about morale in the Russian military?
I have to believe that morale amongst the Russian military has been non-existent for quite some time now, but I am baffled by these pictures and videos of all these Russians mass surrendering. I've seen the pictures, I've seen the videos, and they look terrible. These are guys that haven't even been in combat the last 2.5 years. Most of the Russians surrendering are conscripts, 18, 19, 20-year-old draftees who didn't sign up for this. They're not being paid a real salary. They didn't receive real training. Russia was trying to cheat. They were trying to send their contract soldiers and their best units to the combat zone to make advances, and they were staffing the border with just guys with heartbeats. And shocking, when Ukrainian forces who actually know what they're doing show up, they just surrender en masse because they didn't ask for this. They didn't sign up for this. So I do have sympathy for these contract soldiers. They did the right thing. They're going to live. Unlike a lot of their patriots, their comrades, if they surrender, they'll be treated fairly under the law, the rules of international law. Ukraine wants to exchange them back to get their own people back, so perhaps they won't even have to wait in a POW camp that long. As for the Chechens, they're just cowards. All they do is post on social media. They don't do any real fighting, and Russian conscripts fear them more than enemy units. The Chechens are used as barrier troops. They're used as bullies to intimidate and negatively motivate ordinary Russian soldiers. The fact that they would surrender in mass as well proves they're not true believers. They're not real fighters. They know they'll be exchanged back as soon as possible because Kadyrov wants his own guys back to protect himself in Chechnya.
So, one other character that said some very interesting things recently is Belarusian dictator Alexander Lukashenko. What do you make of that? What is he thinking? What is he doing? And why is he saying what he is saying?
Yeah, it's incredible to me. 2.5 years into this war, Lukashenko's an idiot, but he works for Putin. And Putin is signaling like crazy to everyone that he wants to talk. He wants a way out of this. He wants a ceasefire. Now, the terms he gave, he gave this press conference a couple of weeks ago, and he basically said acceptable terms to begin peace talks is basically Ukraine surrender everything. Everything I failed to take militarily the last 2.5 years, just give it to me now, and we can begin the talks for a ceasefire. That's not really a sweet deal. So I don't think Lukashenko is offering anything different. But with Viktor Orban going on his world peace tour to Moscow, Beijing, and Mar-a-Lago, now Lukashenko is screaming, why doesn't Ukraine and Belarus and Russia just sit down at the table and have a brotherly conversation so that we can achieve peace? You can't do that, Lukashenko. You can't call the people in Kyiv Nazis for 2.5 years and then say, can we please sit down with the Nazis and be friends again? This is your bed. You have to lie in it. Ukraine is not this stupid. They know that Russia's looking for a freeze in the conflict so they can rearm, mobilize more people, consolidate their gains, and then come back for more of Ukraine's territory in 2 years, 4 years, or 6 years. So Lukashenko can say whatever he wants. Putin can say whatever he wants. Nobody that understands this conflict is going to fall for it.
So that's really interesting. How do you make of the situation, though, going on in Moscow? How are they interpreting this, specifically in light of the fact that it appears Russia might be having some economic problems? Can you talk about some of the economic issues currently occurring in Russia?
There's so many bad reports for Russia with 4 dams failing in 2 weeks. Russia's losing about 1 dam a week. And every time one of these dams goes, an area is flooded. Local residents don't have clean drinking water. People lose their homes. The rail network is collapsing after 2.5 years of Western sanctions, lack of labor, doing all the men fleeing and being mobilized. Their planes are falling out of the sky. Their planes are having mechanical malfunctions all the time. Utility disasters in the summertime because they couldn't keep up with high temperatures. Everything this winter is going to get worse. Russia just announced a reintroduction of their ban on exports of refined oil products, gasoline, diesel, kerosene, because a quarter of their oil refineries are knocked offline. They're telling Belarus and Kazakhstan, don't export to anyone aside from us. we need to buy all of your refined oil products just to heat everyone's home this winter. To me, it's incredible that RT News two years ago were making these absurd propaganda videos about by Christmas, everyone in Europe will be eating their pet hamsters. And Russia is suffering more. Nobody in Moscow has been attacked, yet they're going to experience this winter massive utility failures due to a lack of manpower, due to a lack of Western components, and just general incompetence and corruption. Russia can't save itself. And I think Putin is very concerned about this winter. Last winter was bad. This winter will be worse. And he's just trying to hold on to power at this point.
So, looking towards the next few months, what should we keep an eye on? Where do you think there might be some big developments? And where do you think it goes next for Kursk? Do you think they'll just hold that position? Do you think they'll expand? What should we look ahead for?
So Russia has already begun building new trench lines 45 kilometers deep. And if Ukraine wants to just create a new buffer zone 20 to 30 kilometers deep into Russian territory for themselves, that's a win. That's a huge win. I don't see why Ukraine needs to go deeper than 45 kilometers because they've already maneuvered behind Russia's two trench lines that they dug on the border. Those two trench lines that Russia dug now belong to Ukraine. They can just sweep sideways, get behind them, go north, go south into Bryansk and Belgorod. And thank you very much, Russia. You just built Ukraine two trench lines that they can now staff and create a buffer zone on Russia's side of the border. This is what Putin said was their stated objective in Kharkiv. And I mean, just draw a clear contrast between what Russia attempted to do last May and what Ukraine achieved this month. It couldn't be any more stark. Aside from that, you said the next couple months, what's coming up? I do want to add a political angle here in that I believe Ukraine wanted to launch this initiative in Kursk to reinvigorate Western media and let Western politicians know they're in this fight to win. Russia can't win. So I do believe this December and January, we got to get through the November election first, but this December and January, before the next US president takes office, there has to be another vote in the US Congress. Another $60 billion in military aid needs to be passed. Ukraine knows this, and I think supporters of Ukraine in Congress also know this. So here's the result. If we give Ukraine the weapons and support they need, their heroes will get the job done. Russia is a beat dog at this point. And you can see with these mass surrenders, if we just give Ukraine a little bit more, if we just give them a little bit more time, Russia will collapse spectacularly.
So let me ask you just one last question, a personal question. We do have the election soon in the United States, and there's a lot of people that think that perhaps Donald Trump would do more for Ukraine than the Vice President Harris would do. When you're looking at it, what's your takeaway? Who do you plan to support?
People think that because they want to think that. I understand there are people who support Donald Trump who also support Ukraine. But show me the clip. Show me the statements. Show me the tweets. Because it's all ambiguous at best. I've told people, show me a tweet that Donald Trump has sent out in the last 2.5 years in which Donald Trump condemns a single Russian war crime, and I'll vote for Donald Trump. But they don't exist. So anybody pushing this narrative that Donald Trump might be better for Ukraine, you don't actually listen to what Donald Trump says and does. You might be listening to Mike Pompeo or some of his advisors, but nobody speaks for Trump but Trump. And when it comes to J.D. Vance, they were celebrating on Kremlin State TV when Trump picked J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance could not be any more hostile to Ukraine, bragging to his friends that he refuses phone calls and meetings and he absolutely hates Ukraine. It's no coincidence that Donald Trump picked J.D. Vance, and J.D. Vance just happened to be the most anti-Ukraine senator in the United States Senate. So when it comes to Tim Walz and Kamala Harris, I argue worst case scenario, it's more of the same as far as Biden policies. But I do believe that when the administration changes over, and if Kamala Harris wins we're going to get new people, a new national security advisor, a new secretary of defense. The entire national security team will change. And I do think there will be a desire to bring this war to an end faster, even if it risks, that's been escalation management, stopping Russia from using nuclear weapons. I don't see Jake Sullivan changing his mind in the next 5 months, but when we get a new person, I do think some policies will be changed and more will be done to bring this war to a faster conclusion.
Jake, this is some really great explanations. Thanks for your time today.
Thanks for having me back.